Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a couple of minutes. So thank you for your patience, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome everyone to the JD Power Consumer Financing Satisfaction Study pre-release. This is Lisa Stymack. Wanted to welcome everyone to the call. We are just over half of our total registrants are dialed in now. We're just 3 minutes over the hour, so I'm going to give it till 5 after and we'll get started. We probably won't go the whole hour, so I want to make sure I allow people to join, and we'll probably be able to release you a little bit early. So hang in there for 2 more minutes and we'll come back live. Thanks for joining. All right. Welcome everyone. We're at about 5 after and want to go ahead and get started in respect of everyone's time that's on. We have just about everybody that registered at this point in time. I'm sure there'll be some additional folks that come in, but wanted to say thank you so much for taking time out to join us today to talk about the Consumer Financing Satisfaction Study. This is a pre-release webinar. We will officially be releasing the results tomorrow to subscribers. But because of a few reasons that we'll go through throughout today's session, we wanted to pull some of these insights forward, share them with the industry, and really start building excitement around this program that we're very, very proud of. For those that don't know, I'm Lisa Stymack. I'm the Account Director for the Auto Finance Practice for Client Services, both in U.S. and Canada, and have been with JD Power about 20 years, so it is my pleasure to have everyone together today to be talking about these results. For the practice, you'll see on the slide here Jim Houston and Patrick Rosenberg. Patrick is in the room with me here today. Jim is currently representing JD Power at the Talk Auto Conference in Toronto, so wish him luck at that event. And then Laura Barber as well. She's our industry analyst and was a big contributor to the overall study results that we're about to see here today. To kind of kick things off for today's discussion, I want to make sure that I set the tone for what we're here to accomplish. First, today is really about a review of the enhancements that we made to the 2018 CFS study. It was a redesign year for us. High-level insights, and what I mean by high level is non-lender specific. We will not be revealing any lender-specific performance that's set for tomorrow for those that subscribe, and talk a little bit about how lenders are actually using this data to apply and create change inside their organization. As I've stated, tomorrow will be the release, and Monday will be the press release to the media, which typically hits the wire at about 8 a.m. Eastern. For those that do subscribe, I have presentations booked for a few of you already, so that's very exciting. Those will not begin until January. So if you haven't already reached out to me, please do so, and let's get those booked now. We know that the presentation season can get challenging with schedules, so please let's take care of that as soon as possible. Our team is very proud of the research that we produce. As many of you know, we did a significant redesign of the dealer study, our other large syndicated study, in 2017. And now in 2018, we've invested in a significant redesign of this, the consumer financing satisfaction study. That, coupled with a very robust and long-ranging span of experience, our team, myself, Patrick, Jim, and Laura, are very, very proud of the insights that we're able to provide to you this year in CFS through the redesign and our collective efforts. And by collective efforts, I really do want to thank all of our clients that participated in the roundtables that were leading up to this redesign in both Dallas and Detroit. We had some pretty good participation in Detroit, and we had good participation in Dallas as well, and then individual sessions with a few lenders that couldn't attend in person. The point being that this was a collaborative effort, very representative of what the market needs today, and you'll see the title of the slide, really around digital and journey-based insights. That's what we try to provide to you through this redesign, and you'll see that a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is centered around that. Today's results that we're going to be talking to you about are largely going to be at an industry and or segment level. Overall, we captured about 14,000 lender evaluations in our results, and of course, that's a very fundamental value proposition of JD Power Research, is that we have thousands upon thousands of responses that give you a lot of power and confidence in our numbers. For those that aren't familiar, the CFS study is split into two categories, the mass market and luxury. Unlike our dealer study, which is arranged that way and also by lender segment, captive and non-captive, the CFS study has two distinct categories, mass market and luxury, and that is defined by the vehicle itself, not the lender necessarily. So there could be a lender that shows up, a non-captive lender, and or a captive lender that shows up in both segments. In total, we had 26 ranked brands in mass market this year and 15 in luxury. That's about on par with years previous, but I think we're up 2 or 3 lenders in total overall, so that's also good. In terms of a mix of respondents, this is again at a total view. As a percent of the 14,000 lender evaluations, about 80% of those are loan transactions and 78% of them are new. Just to kind of give you some perspective as we look through the results, how that may be influencing some of the responses that we share. A unique proposition that we offer to the marketplace is a view of the direct customer. So certainly we do capture the indirect market without question, as that makes up a very large percentage of today's marketplace still. But we actually do have an entire battery for the direct customer. So where and when they interact with you as a lender, similar to the indirect lender, we are asking questions. So we are uniquely offering this in the marketplace to our customers. Talking about journey, this is a very broad customer journey study. We start at the very beginning when the customer begins shopping for you as a lender, all the way to the lease end experience. So there is an immense amount of value in being able to see this customer's journey from start to finish. Again, another unique value proposition that we add to the marketplace. Underscoring further the digital impact and other touch point preferences, what we heard from our clients during the roundtables is, yes, we definitely want to hear a lot more about the digital, but please don't forget about the other channels. We know that there are other preferences that customers have, whether that be a phone crutch, and we actually will touch on that later. So while we invested a lot of real estate into the digital side, we did not neglect those other channel options that customers are still using today. So getting into the data a little bit more, this is what our redesigned model looks like for 2018. Those that participated in the roundtable are aware that there were some new factors that we were going to test in the marketplace. That does not at all mean that we knew that they would, in fact, be a factor. But we were very successful in our redesign, and we successfully created 2 new factors to the model. And I guess I'm not right in saying we created those 2 new factors. The customers are telling us those are 2 new factors. So let me walk you around this wheel in each component, and then we'll continue on, like I said, with the new factors in detail. So first, billing and payment on the top right-hand side, 54%. That 54% that you see there indicates how much of the customer's billing and payment experience drives their overall score with you as a lender. So each of those percentages, and they tally 100, is the influence of that particular experience on your overall score as a lender. So by and large, you see billing and payment really dominating this overall model, and that may surprise you, but let me kind of explain that here for a second. If we go around the wheel, you see website is 22, onboarding is 9, origination is 8, and mobile is 7. The issue with looking at the model and this view in isolation is that this is all respondents, and not all respondents experience all of these various things. Not all respondents have a mobile app experience. Not all respondents are eligible to evaluate you in the origination and onboarding section. In fact, 35% of customers are asked those particular factors, while the rest are not. So the survey focuses on roughly a 4-year span. We only ask those customers in the first 12 months of their experience the onboarding and origination piece. So what that means is there's a lot of people who have a 0% weight for onboarding and origination, and that therefore is diluting that percent from a mathematical basis. I'm going to show you a second chart here in a minute that's going to illuminate that. But before we do, I do want to address the 2 new factors, origination and mobile app experience. Origination, years ago, for those that remember, was kind of similar to this, and I think we called it in-dealership experience, but now I think it's more appropriately labeled origination. So what customers said is, absolutely, yes, this does have an impact on my overall satisfaction, and our science team indicated that mathematically, yes, there is a correlation. And the same is true with the mobile app experience. So for those that do have a mobile app experience with their lender, it does, in fact, influence their overall score. More impressive would be to show you this chart, though. And this is when all factors occur to a respondent, meaning I experienced all 5 points of that model. What happens to the impact weights? And without looking hard, you can see that the mobile app experience skyrockets to 32% of the customer's importance weight. So there's no question that the investment that you guys have been making, I know many of you have successfully and recently launched a mobile app, either alone or in conjunction with the OEM. Those of you that are still working on it, this definitely gives you some ammunition to continue on those efforts and potentially increase some resources allocated to that. Customers are very, very focused on this, and some further charts that we're going to show you is going to underscore that point. Certainly, before we move on, I do want to mention that this is just one journey where a customer experienced all 5 points of the model, or all 5 themes that we capture in the study. There are many other iterations of this, where the customer experiences bill pay, website, onboarding and origination, but not mobile app. And another value in our research is being able to tell you how those weights fluctuate based on what that customer journey looks like. All right, so starting to get into the data a little bit more, we're going to go through the wheel that I just showed you, that module of our weights, kind of one by one. I'm going to touch on each one of those. There's going to be some supporting slides, one or a few for each of those areas. But before we do, I wanted to do a little bit of a backdrop and kind of claim our overarching message, which is an educated customer is best. And certainly this is a message we have conveyed before, and actually can even see in our dealer study. A KPI in our dealer study has been that dealers feel strongly about the lender putting effort towards creating an educated customer. So we know that there's really pressure from both ends to further educate your customer base, and our research shows that an educated customer is best because they are significantly more satisfied. So let's start on the right-hand side of this chart first. You can see that the first layer is indirect versus direct, and these percentages are the percent of our respondents. It is not a percent of the marketplace, though it is fairly close. So 12% of our respondents indicated that they had a direct contract with their lender. And if you go through each of the bullets that support that, you can see why satisfaction is so much higher, 867 versus the 833 on the other side of the chart, which is a non-educated or a passive shopper, as we call it. First is 84% of these customers shopped online for their finance options. That's a very, very high percent. It definitely skews to the younger, so 58% are younger than 40 years old. 73% actually shopped for a vehicle with a provider already in mind. And 23% shopped third-party sources, and we can actually tell you more detail about what those third-party sources are in our research. And for me, what's really most impressive about that is that 33% of them actually use that third-party financing to secure their contract. And a driving force, and while it's not a huge number, it is one of the top driving forces for selection of a lender in the direct channel, is that they have an existing relationship with them. So that all of this behavior leads to a high satisfaction score of 867, and that's on a 1,000-point scale. And most of you are familiar with our research. You know, that's a pretty high score. What's interesting to me is if you compare that 867 to the 857 directly next to it, that's out of the indirect channel, but it's specific to the proactive shopper. So there's a very close distance between 857 and 867, but a big difference between 833 and 857. Within the indirect channel, a passive shopper versus a proactive shopper yields a very different outcome. What I will say versus reading the bullets within here, because everyone that's on here will get a copy of this deck, so please don't worry about that. The last bullet is really what's worth mentioning, and that's when the dealer is making that lender selection, it really does have a negative impact on satisfaction. And you can see that 62% of the passive shoppers say the dealer ultimately made the choice for me, where a proactive shopper say only 38%. So that educated customer really does make a difference. And we're going to talk about ways that you can start fostering that relationship. Okay. Going back to the wheel, now that we've set that backdrop, starting with origination, kind of going episodically, we call this impactful origination activities. This is in no way an exhaustive list of activities you can and or should do to influence satisfaction in the origination theme, if you will. This is a list that we picked that certainly has a positive impact on satisfaction and is centered around an educational theme. Starting on the left, you can see the mass market overall satisfaction score of 839. So that's at an industry level. Mass market satisfaction is 839 on a 1,000-point scale. As you add in these subsequent activities, you can see the rising trend of satisfaction scores, and or conversely at the bottom, the decline in satisfaction score when it is not. So the first two are actually KPIs from this year's research. And for those that don't know, KPIs are diagnostic questions, the yes, no, who, how often, how many type of questions. So they're non-satisfaction questions that are highly correlated with high performers. So these are the short list of things that you have to do to meet customer expectations and improve satisfaction. So the first one is contacted by dealer prior to visiting. And so we really see that early involvement in that decision-making process is having a distinct impact on the overall outcome of the experience. And this is a new KPI for us this year. That's followed by application to approval time in 15 minutes or less. Those that are familiar with DFS know that this has been a KPI since as long as I can remember in the dealer study. It's certainly something we talk about in the industry, is about how long that customer is sitting there. That has the biggest jump from a numeric perspective from the first KPI to the second KPI. So it's a very big compounding effect. Followed then by the dealer clearly identified the finance provider. So we still see a percent of customers higher than we'd like, but decreasing over time, that leave the dealership absent knowing who their finance provider even is. We would take it a step further and say, not only are you talking about who they are, but what do they stand for? What do they do well? There's a whole battery of that inside CFS, so there's additional detail around that we can offer you. And then the last KPI is onboarding information, underscore, bold, while still at the dealership. So that's the key metric here, is we believe there's onboarding information that should be offered to the customer at that point of sale. We know that there are certainly limitations to what you can provide at that point of sale time, knowing that there hasn't been a lot established yet. But there are very specific examples that we can provide through the research and our experience that some lenders are using today, and it's creating quite a big difference. On the right here, you can just see that there are additional KPIs that we have in the study. This is the short list. What I'm showing you here in terms of origination is a short list of diagnostics we have. There's a much more comprehensive list that we can share with you as a subscriber to walk you through what a blueprint for this might look like for you. All right, so then on to onboarding as we go around that wheel again episodically. This is the when, what, and how of onboarding. When we talk about the when, what we say here is that the key is to really do this before first statement. Onboarding has to happen before that first statement is received. And what I really mean by that is it has to start happening in the dealership and then be completed by and before the first statement. When we talk about the in-dealership experience, you can actually see a very significant difference in satisfaction scores on the attribute time given to make my first payment when onboarding information is offered inside the dealership. Furthermore, helping the customer set up their online statements before the first statement occurs also significantly impacts satisfaction. So that ties into the onboarding. The onboarding is designed to help get the customer going electronically. All of this yields higher satisfaction. The what? This is a really interesting one for me. A lot of my clients talk about the importance of auto pay, materials, instructions, descriptions inside their onboarding materials. And without question, that would seem like the most important thing to do. However, the research this year says that there are other informational points that outweigh auto pay in terms of a positive impact to satisfaction. In fact, there are 3 additional inputs that we identified in CFS that have a bigger impact on satisfaction as it pertains to onboarding than auto pay information does. And then the how. How do you go about sharing this onboarding information? What channels are you using? We ask the customer what channel they receive their onboarding information from: mail, digital, calls, and through digital, we even specify what digital channel. And you can see that, and you probably aren't surprised, and nor were we, that satisfaction is high when digital channels are used for onboarding. What you may be surprised to hear is how particular traditional channels paired with digital channels can bolster the experience. I know many of my customers struggle with the use of calls and mail, and significant resources and both, intellectual property, time, and money go into these decisions. And I think there's a really clear message this year about the right onboarding channels to use to impact satisfaction. All right, moving on to billing and payment. So we know that overall it makes up a big chunk of the pie, 54% when we include all respondents. But when we start to look at the individual interactions, the importance does go down. Of course, it remains an aspect of the experience 100% of the customers interact with. So we're not suggesting it's of no importance, but there are very specific things that you should be looking at. Statements should be simple and digital. And if we look at this particular chart, the first thing that I would call your attention to is that it's organized really in traditional methods and digital methods. Forget the individual columns within. The left side is digital, the right side is traditional methods. And if you look at the floating dash line, you can see there is a very apparent difference in satisfaction scores between digital and traditional methods. Furthermore, there is a very big difference on the mobile app. And that's when we start to see the difference by age group, the less than 40 and 40 and older. 20% of the less than 40 are looking at their statements via the mobile app. And it yields by far the highest satisfaction. As it pertains to traditional methods on the right-hand side, it's impossible to ignore the 34% and the 45% still using the traditional bill statement. Folks are just going to dig in their heels on this. There's a big portion of these customers, you can see it here, you know this, I don't have to tell you this, you know what your customers do. But what we did ask in CFS this year is, why aren't you using online statements? And some of them just aren't going to change. But there is, interestingly, 10% of customers that say, if my lender offered it, I would change. So I guess the outcome of that is, don't stop trying to change those customers, but it's a really small percent versus those that say, I'm always going to want this option as long as you continue to allow me to have this option. So we talked about looking at statements. Now let's talk about making payments. What we see is there's an increasing desire to control how I make my payments. So the first standout to me is the red call-out box, which is around using the finance provider's mobile app. By far the highest satisfaction at 873. So when I use the finance provider's mobile app to make a payment, my satisfaction is head and shoulders above all other channels. It's roughly 5% of the total marketplace, but if we split this by age group, it over doubles for the less than 40. And we know that use isn't incredibly high yet of the mobile app just because it's not available, but we think that this is going to be a trend to watch for in CFS going forward, a significant trend. Further underscoring the need to focus on that channel is the fact that auto pay went down from 36 to 34% year over year in terms of the channel that customers are using to pay their bill. Very interestingly, those under 40 are significantly less likely to use auto pay, and half of those customers say the reason they don't want to use it is because they're uncomfortable. It's about control. These customers want to control their payment. It's not about insufficient funds necessarily. It's about, I have the money, but I'm going to release it to you when I'm ready to release it to you under my terms. And of course, we have this data for each of the lenders, and we can show you how you compare, and those that are best in class, what their percentages are. While I mentioned that we do focus on digital, we did remove the call center battery from the model in 2018, and that was a decision that we made coming out of the roundtables. Our clients were comfortable with that. We certainly were comfortable with that because it had a very, very low incidence rate, meaning very few customers used that channel and were able to provide us with meaningful data for you. So it was real estate that was wasted, and we used that real estate to focus on digital. But what we couldn't do is not ask them about contact and what their channel preferences are. And what we found is, and you know this too, is that the phone crutch remains. There's no question that customers are still using this as a crutch, but what we see is there's definitely an educational opportunity for digital options. So the table below here is a focus on contact activity, the method that was used, and this is for the past 12 months. So any contact that a customer made in the past 12 months, this is what we're looking at here. And what we're looking at first in the first column there is any contact reason at all. I contacted you for any reason. It could have been a problem, it could have been a change of address, it could have been anything. 70% of customers said they use phone and 54% use any digital, website, text, email, app. Obviously, this is multiple response question. I could have used one, failed, and had to go to a different one. There is a clear relationship in satisfaction. The phone yields lower satisfaction on a statistical basis than any digital, 854 versus 857. Further, we look at contact for customers that specifically made a contact to make a payment. Again, multiple response because I could have attempted to make a digital payment and that failed. And when we look at those percentages, 55% said they used the phone, where 63% used any digital, again, website, text, email, app. Again, the satisfaction relationship remains. So while this is no surprise to you and no surprise to us that phone remains a necessity, there definitely is a gap. And what I mean by that is in the blue chart below. We know that if there's a failure in a digital channel or self-service attempt, the customer is going to call to resolve. What I was personally surprised to see is that when we isolate customers who made no digital and or self-service attempts before calling, that represented 50% of the customers that made a contact to their lender. So 50% of the people that made a contact in the past 12 months made no effort at all to do anything before calling you. 28% of those customers called you to make a payment, and 21% of those customers called for account maintenance, so change of address. Those are pretty surprising numbers, and they're very costly numbers. So we think that there's definitely a lot of opportunity here for education. This takes us back to onboarding. That early onboarding education about the different options the lender has to make payments, to sign up for e-statements, all of that comes full circle to this. And this does kind of touch on the topic of journey analytics. While I can tell you about how a customer experienced you, and I can isolate those customers that only did a phone contact versus used the phone and a digital before, this isn't journey analytics. Journey analytics is something I've been talking with a lot of customers about. It's gaining a ton of traction, and it is something that J.D. Power recently announced an alliance with ClickFox on. This is a great example of that. So if you have a failure inside a digital channel and that customer then had to call the live rep, but that live rep then gets a low score because that customer's frustrated that it took them a half hour to do whatever they tried to do, but it was no fault of the rep, how do you measure that journey? How far back can you understand that customer and what happened to them? Journey analytics is, again, something that we've been talking a lot about. If any of you guys want any information about journey analytics, not for discussion today, but definitely something that comes to mind when I think about this component of the experience here in particular. The last data chart that I'd like to share with you today is about the mobile app, and I think it has to be. We opened up this discussion with showing you that the mobile app drives 36% of the experience when all 5 factors occur. So we'd be remiss not to tell you more. You're probably surprised as you're processing this chart to see auto finance at the top at 874 versus some of the other channels. I do have to mention to you that this is not an apples to apples comparison. So this is all J.D. Power data, and these are all J.D. Power index scores. But everything below the auto finance line came from our 2018 mobile app experience benchmark study. So certainly a lot of value for those on the phone that are interested in benchmarking outside their own industry. But not for discussion today per se. What we wanted to show you with this is that of the customers that are using the mobile app inside the auto finance world today, things are going pretty good. What we think is driving that is the simplicity of the transaction. These customers are largely coming into the app to simply make a payment. Now, there is lower incidence overall, too. You can see that to the right. Auto finance incidence is roughly 21% of logging into the app in the past 12 months versus credit card at 39 and banking at 55. That all makes sense to me. What I'd like to leave you with on this chart is the untapped potential. Your customers are very interested, and I think we've proven that with the previous slide, and they're pretty happy with the service they've received thus far. What it's time for now is to increase the functionality of these apps and the opportunity for the customers to do more. And it's both a push-pull. It's them being able to interact with you more, to send, provide, and transact, but it's also a push from you. We actually ask a question in the survey about what the customer would like to receive, what types of features they would like to have available inside their mobile app. So we can help provide that insight to you. So as you, as a captive, for example, build these apps in conjunction with your OEM partners, how are you fighting for real estate and space and resources and ensuring that the right things are included in that app? Obviously, this information could be largely valuable to those discussions. And really that applies even to the bank side as well. There's always a struggle for real estate, making sure that you're able to communicate with your customers on the terms that they want and value is what we can offer you through the research. I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts about CFS. This is a preview. So we were meant today to kind of wet the whistle, get you excited about tomorrow for the official release for those that are subscribers and for those that are considering subscribing. And for those less familiar, we want to make sure that you understand there's a ton of data that we just quite frankly can't talk about today and want to make sure we remind you we have a significant sized battery of questions asking the customer about their shopping experience. What online financing sources did they use? What kind of decision making did that lead to? We've already talked about direct and indirect. We also understand a customer that's refinanced. We added a brand image battery this year so we can understand a lender's brand image impact on satisfaction. So for those that subscribe, you will see in your presentation a plus minus impact of your brand to overall satisfaction. We included lease end questions inside the survey this year. A lot of you understand and remember that we offered a lease end study in 16 and 17. It was a standalone offering. We did not do that in 18, though there is active discussion about returning that platform going forward. So if that's something that you'd like to share with me, if that's something you're interested, please do. But for 18, we did include lease end metrics inside CFS, so you have access to that, and we kind of pulled some questions from that lease end study here. We do ask loyalty and advocacy to the dealer, to the brand, to the provider. Newly added NPS. On your scorecard tomorrow, for those that subscribe, you will see your NPS scores. We have both the Net Promoter Score, the percent promoters, and the percent detractors already in the scorecard for you to see. And then there's a whole host of information around the mobile app we didn't talk about today that we'd love to share with you. These are some questions to just consider. Nothing that I'm going to read out loud for you guys today. This is something that you can route internally and take a look at for yourself. But these are key business questions that I want to make sure you're thinking about in terms of the CFS study and how we could work together to help you. And then in closing, I want to make sure that everyone's clear on release information. If you are a subscriber, be sure to have your scorecard meeting with me. I believe I've reached out to everyone to secure that. We're going to have those throughout the day tomorrow. Data will be released through our JD Power Vox platform at 2 p.m. Eastern. Monday, as a reminder, is the press release. We will go live at 8 a.m. And I welcome you to contact me with any questions in the meantime. So with that, I want to make sure that I say thank you to everyone for attending today. We are extremely excited to release these results. We're very, very proud of the work. We do appreciate the clients for getting involved and helping us with this redesign. And I think that's it. Patrick, anything on your end? Patrick's shaking his head.
No, thank you. I think
Patrick's shaking his head no. So again, thank you so much, and you guys have a great day.